Halloween, a night of costumes and candy, a night of laughter and scares, but beneath the surface, a darkness stirs, a chilling truth. Last Halloween, over 2,000 children were rushed to emergency rooms. Their injuries? Tricks gone wrong, costumes turned deadly. Candy laced with poison. We celebrate the macabre, we dress as monsters. But what if the real monsters are not the ones we pretend to be? What if the real horrors lie hidden in the shadows of this seemingly innocent holiday?
Some Christians think it's fine to dress up in costumes and enjoy themselves, seeing it as innocent fun. On the other hand, some Christians believe that taking part in any way is wrong, since Halloween is seen as a day dedicated to evil spirits and darkness. So, who is correct? Can Christians truly enjoy Halloween without putting their faith at risk?
October 31st is like the ultimate day. It's like Christians, Easter and Christmas all rolled in together. The celebration usually starts at dusk and goes on. The golden hour is 11 p.m. to midnight. That's when the most demonic forces are out and about and active. People should not participate in any way, shape, or form because you are worshiping the devil. There is no two ways about it. I mean, he's real happy that Christians allow their kids to serve him one night of the year. I mean, he's pretty happy about that.
Halloween, a tapestry of ancient rituals woven into modern revelry. We don our masks, unaware of the ancient echoes they hold. We carve our pumpkins, oblivious to the sacrifices they represent. We think we know Halloween, a harmless night of fun. But what if we've been tricked? What if the truth is far more sinister than we ever imagined?
When American settlers came from England, they brought different beliefs about ghosts and witches. In the 1800s, many immigrants from Ireland and Scotland came to the United States and shared their Halloween traditions. Other groups also added their own ideas to Halloween. For example, German immigrants shared exciting stories about witches, while Haitian and African communities introduced their voodoo beliefs, which included ideas about black cats, fire, and witchcraft. Today, Halloween is the second most popular holiday after Christmas. Can you believe that? But it's true, because if you walk into stores in August, you start seeing Halloween costumes and decorations popping up in Walmarts, grocery stores, and other places. They're even rearranging aisles to make space for all that stuff people buy. Halloween is the second most popular holiday. Over $15 billion will be spent on Halloween this year. Yes, $15 billion. And guess what? Over $400 million of that will be spent just on costumes for pets. So, $400 million just for pets. Think about that. That's how crazy things have gotten today. More and more Christians are getting involved in Halloween, and even their pastors, bishops, priests, and elders, and some well-known Christian leaders in America are encouraging them to join in.
Halloween, a night of spooky fun. But its roots run deep. They twist back through centuries, back to a time of ancient rituals and primal fears. Understanding Halloween's origins is a challenge. It's like piecing together a shattered mirror. Each shard reflects a fragment of the past, but the full picture remains elusive. Some say Halloween began with the Celts. Their festival of Samhain marked the end of summer. The boundary between our world and the other world thinned. Spirits could cross over. Was it a time of fear or a time of celebration? The answer, perhaps, is both. Halloween's origins are steeped in duality. Life and death, light and shadow, treat and trick. Imagine, if you will, the Celts of old, gathered around bonfires, their faces lit by flickering flames. They celebrate Samhain. The harvest is over. Winter approaches. The veil between worlds is thin. The dead can walk among the living. It is a time of both peril and possibility. The Celts wear costumes. They leave offerings for spirits. They try to appease the forces of darkness to ensure a prosperous year ahead.
Hello people, I'm Ginny Metherell. I'm a fourth generation Irish descendant witch. And today's video, of course, is all about that most wonderful and glorious of Sabbats, Halloween, otherwise known as Samhain. So 31st of October, which is just around the corner, is considered quite a big deal by the witch community. It is, of course, Halloween. There are so many rituals, rites and traditions associated with Halloween that today's video is going to give you a little overview of the main ones that a witch of traditional descent might celebrate on this most auspicious of days, the 31st of October. So according to the Irish language pronunciation website, Samhain is how this word is pronounced. And it means November. So what the 31st of October is actually celebrating is Samhain Eve, the night before November. Now this is witches' new year. It is the summer's end, the end of the period of light and the beginning of the period of darkness. The oldest, most pagan form of celebrating this day is to destroy your fire, to put out your hearth. People from all around would congregate on top of a hill and watch the bonfire that would support them through the winter be lit. And if you don't have a fire at home where you can take the light from your bonfire, from your communal bonfire, I would suggest take light to your candle and put it inside your pumpkin. These are all good stuff. Families and friends would bring the light from the communal bonfire to those who are too sick and infirm to come. Dancing and singing and leaping through the flames of the bonfire all took place on this night. In the old pagan times, the ancient Britons were said to be able to see on the top of each hill, almost like a beacon, the bonfires of Samhain burning. It's a very special time, one of the high points of the year. So to practice something that our ancestors did will bring them closer to us. Now, of course, Halloween is when, as I have just mentioned, the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest, and the spirits of the dead can cross over the bridge of swords and visit the living. November is really known as the month for the dead. Celebrating November's Eve or Halloween is celebrating the time when the veil starts to thin. They can come and do the dance of the dead amongst the living through the whole of November, but the start is Halloween. Now you may have come across the old tradition of leaving food out by your hearth for the dead to eat. This was again to avert the evil eye from you. If the spirits of the dead are too busy eating the food that you've laid out for them, then they will not disturb you in your peaceful enjoyment of your own home. It is also honouring your ancestors, because your ancestors will come too. I do like this ritual actually. It's something that you can do with your children. You can get them to place the bread and the apples by the stove. In the morning, if they're still there, take the bread and the apples and bury them in the garden, and that'll ensure that the spirits are kept at bay. It is also important on this night to make sure your doors are unlocked all night so that spirits can come and go freely. Traditionally, amongst the ancients, Halloween was the time to get married. But of course, the new year starts as soon as the sun has set. The sun has set, the bonfires would be lit, and the marriage ceremony would take place at the very beginning of the new year. To get married on Halloween, just as the sun has set and your bonfire has been lit and the moon is beginning to rise, that's the time.
This Halloween, we journey into the heart of the holiday. We peel back the layers of tradition. We expose the terrifying secrets that lurk beneath.
On the Illuminati's calendar, the highest, the most sacred of all nights of human sacrifice is that of Samhain. Now, the nights of Samhain are observed from October 29th through the 31st. October 29th is the first day of Samhain, and the second day of Samhain, and it wraps up on what you would call Halloween, the third night of Samhain. Now, Samhain is the Celtic lord of the dead. He is depicted as a stag god. He always has been depicted as a stag god. This is just how they practice in the occult. Now, this is one of the very few remaining reliefs of the stag god that is still out in the open for anyone to see. This is, of course, this one is in the British Isles. And this one in particular, this would be the stag god, but he's also known as Cernunnos. Okay, that's one of the Celtic names for Samhain. Now, one of the statues of Samhain is, as I said, depicted as a stag god. You notice the antlers and everything. Now, the stag god of the occult world, as has already been pointed out, is nothing else but Nimrod. Nimrod was eventually depicted as a god that had one horn, like Moloch. Some depicted him as having antlers like this stag here. This is just one of those ancient representations of the stag god. Now, during the Nights of Samhain, and the Nights of Samhain came about because of an ancient nomadic people known as the Celts. Now, the Celtic people came into the British Isles and throughout Ireland, Scotland, that entire region, around 900 BC, and basically held all sway and authority in those regions till up and around 900 AD. So almost 2,000 years there, they were in control of that region of the world. Now, the Celtic people, these warrior nomadic people, had a priestly class like just any other major culture you can think of. Their priestly class was known as the Druids. Now, from the Gaelic, Druid means men of oak. This is why the oak tree is still the most sacred tree in the Illuminati world. And it is the same oak that you will find the Illuminati owl at the Bohemian Grove is made out of. That is a 40-foot oak Illuminati owl. Now, the Druids literally held all sway and authority in the Celtic tribe. Because they were priests, they were exempt from going to war. But part of their duties of being a priest was they were supposed to read the entrails of animals and tell you if it was a good time to go to war or if it was a bad time to go to war. They also had the authority to tell people when they could get married and who could get married. They could tell you if a person was and should be allowed to hold some type of officer or some type of authoritarian position within the tribe. They could tell you who could and who could not be allowed to worship at their temples. Now, one of the most ancient of temples that still exists today is that of Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a megalithic stone circle. It was at places like these that the Druids would go and worship their stag god. Now this happened 8 times a year on the major Sabbaths and the minor ones. Stonehenge is difficult to date. The archaeologists, as far as they understand right now, it probably dates back to somewhere around 3000 BC and was built in 3 consecutive building orders. You know, first it was a smaller part, and they built it out, and they built it out again. Now, Stonehenge is made out of a rare blue granite material that can only be found, I think it's about 70-something miles away in Scotland. And the problem is, how did they get something that weighed over 4 tons, some are even up to 10 tons, I believe, how did they move something that heavy, all that distance, over the river and over the grounds to where it resides now? Now, of course, there's various myths and legends, you know, my country. One in particular that says the most powerful wizard in history, Merlin, actually summoned, you know, those great megalithic stones and, you know, made Stonehenge. Well, it's a fanciful tale, but that's all it is. The one interesting thing about Stonehenge, aside from the fact that it's not just a temple complex, it's also an astrological observatory, and it's also the place where the Druids practiced the rites of human sacrifice 8 times a year. archaeologists have already unearthed underneath Stonehenge more than 4,000 human skeletal remains. Now Stonehenge, believe it or not, is a small stone circle. There were literally, there were hundreds throughout that region, and one of the biggest ones, and part of it still exists today for people to look at, is the one in Avesbury. The one in Avesbury is more than a mile in circumference. Now, if Stonehenge is a small one, you can only imagine how many bodies, human sacrifices, the remains must be under Avesbury. But anyways, on the nights of Samhain, Druids would gather at Stonehenge, and they had previously taken gourds or turnips. In America, we use pumpkins, and hollowed them out, and they would fill them up with human fat. This fat had been gathered from previous human sacrifice offerings to the various pagan gods of the Druids. Now, they would take these items, set them aside. Then they would take out these huge cauldrons and put them over a fire pit, and they would light them. And these cauldrons were filled with an apples-like substance, almost like apple juice, or a mead is really the closest thing to it. And they would light those fires, and then they would take these turnips, these gourds, in America we use pumpkins, and they would go wandering out throughout the countryside to various homes of nobility such as dukes, marquises, they'd visit this castle, this manor, and they would literally walk up to these doors and bang on them and scream out trick or treat. For those inside the home, this literally sent a wave of absolute terror throughout their bodies, because if the Lord of the Manor cooperated with the Druids and gave them a treat, they would take one of their own household servants, and if they had no servants, they would use one of their own household members, one of their families, and give them over to those Druid priests so that they could be used as a human sacrifice offering that night. Now, as a reward for the treat, the Druids would leave one of those pumpkins that had been previously filled with fat on the front door and light it. This was supposed to protect everyone inside of that house, that mansion, that manor, from all the demonic forces that they would be summoning up during the nights of Samhain. Now here's the trick. If you did not cooperate with the Druids and give someone over for a human sacrifice offering, they would paint a 6-pointed star in blood with a circle around it on the door. This is the foulest, most evil of all symbols in the occult world. There's nothing that can even come close. You need this symbol to literally call up a demon into this plane of existence. This is known as a hexagram. It's a 6-pointed star with a circle around it. Usually that night, someone would be driven to their death from fear of everything that would be summoning up. They would be being attacked by demons, having these visions and everything. They would literally be driven to their own death through fear. Now, after many hours of wandering about through the countrysides, the Druids would come back to places such as Stonehenge, and this is where they would begin to have their version of fun. They would take their sacrifices, their soon-to-be human sacrifices, and they would line them up in one straight line. Now, do you remember those huge cauldrons we were speaking about? It would be cauldrons such as these huge cauldrons that had been previously filled up with that apple cider or mead-like substance, And the Druids would take apples and throw them into these cauldrons. Now I want you to think of something first before I continue. The boiling point of a liquid in this case is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Literally speaking, it could melt the flesh right off of you. And so what the Druids would be doing, they would be taking apples and throwing it into those cauldrons. Then they would take one of those people and bring them up to the cauldron and say, now if you can take one of those apples out in between your teeth on the first try, we will let you go. Now think about this. How many of you would actually take the opportunity to try to grab one of those apples in between your teeth so that you could leave alive? Well, at first most people would say, sure, I would do it. But you have to remember also, that cauldron has been boiling away for hours and hours and hours. It has reached the boiling point of 212 degrees Fahrenheit. It could literally melt the flesh off of you. Now, would you dip your head into that cauldron? And most people would say no. However, most of those poor victims back then did it. Because you see, that would be the only chance that they had of escaping and living. There was no other choice. If they wanted to have a chance to live and go back to their families, they would take it. Of course, the problem would be, once they dipped their heads into that liquid, I mean, oh my goodness, medically speaking, from my medical background, I can tell you the damage was horrific, you know. Not just the third-degree burns and the scarring alone that would happen afterwards, but the 212 degrees liquid going into the ears would give them permanent hearing loss. Into their mouths, they would have respiratory damage for the rest of their day. If any went in between the eyelids, they'd end up blind or near blind. I mean, the horror of what the Druids considered to be a game is reprehensible in the least. But for those who actually grabbed an apple, the Druids cut their binds off immediately and sent them home. However, if you did not grab an apple in between your teeth on the first try, they threw you on the ground and beheaded you right there on the spot. And the archaeologists have found many of those remains of those people underneath Stonehenge had indeed been beheaded.
Halloween, a tapestry woven from ancient fears and modern anxieties. We see it in the costumes we wear, ghosts and goblins, witches and vampires. Echoes of ancient beings meant to ward off evil. We see it in the jack-o'-lanterns, glowing faces carved into pumpkins. Once they were believed to ward off evil spirits. Now they are symbols of Halloween. But what about the dangers? The real-life horrors that plague this holiday? Vandalism, accidents, even violence. Are these just unfortunate occurrences? Or is there something darker at play? Something we refuse to see? Join us as we delve deeper into the bloody truth behind Halloween. Picture, if you dare, the ancient Celtic world. Forests cloaked in mist, stone circles shrouded in mystery. It is here, amongst the shadows and whispers of the ancient world, that we find the roots of Halloween. The Druids, priests of the Celtic faith, held immense power. They were the keepers of knowledge, the interpreters of dreams, the intermediaries between the mortal realm and the ethereal plane. Samhain, for them, was more than just a festival. It was a sacred time. On this night, the veil between worlds thinned to its most fragile state. The spirits of the dead, both benevolent and malevolent, could walk freely among the living. It was a night of both reverence and fear, a time to honor the departed and appease the restless. The Druids, adorned in ceremonial robes, would light massive bonfires. These were not mere sources of warmth or light. They were portals, blazing gateways to the other world. Their flickering flames danced with shadows, casting eerie specters that seemed to writhe and whisper secrets to those who dared to look too closely.
Halloween has almost completely pagan origins, even though it may seem like just a fun holiday today. Some people think it's harmless, but we should be careful about how we treat it. Christians celebrate or avoid Halloween in different ways. Some hold alternative harvest parties, while others choose to ignore the ghosts, witches, and goblins. They might wear simple costumes like princesses, clowns, cowboys, or superheroes instead. Then there are those who decide not to participate at all and just stay home with the lights turned off. The Bible doesn't mention Halloween, but it does give us essential ideas to help us decide what to think about it. In the Old Testament, witchcraft was considered a serious crime, and people could even be punished for it. Leviticus chapter 19 verse 31. Do not turn to mediums who pretend to consult the dead, or to spiritists who have spirits of divination. Do not seek them out to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. The New Testament warns us about the dangers of the occult. In Acts chapter 8 verses 9 through 24, we meet a man named Simon. His story teaches us that occult practices do not belong in Christianity. In Acts chapter 13 verses 6 through 11, we learn about Elymas the sorcerer, whom Paul calls a child of the devil. Elymas was against everything good and twisted God's truth. Then in Acts chapter 16, we read about a girl in Philippi who could tell fortunes. Paul helped her by casting out the evil spirit that gave her those abilities. It's important to note that Paul wouldn't allow even a true statement from someone controlled by a demon. In Acts chapter 19, we see new believers who used to be part of the occult. They showed how serious they were by confessing their past, bringing their magic items, and burning them for everyone to see. And many of those who had practiced magical arts collected their books and, throwing book after book on the pile, began burning them in front of everyone. They calculated their value and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. Acts chapter 19 verse 19. Philippians chapter 1 verse 27. Only be sure to lead your lives in a manner that will be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I do come and see you or remain absent, I will hear about you that you are standing firm in one spirit and in one purpose, with one mind striving side by side, as if in combat for the faith of the gospel. Many churches celebrate harvest festivals and use costumes, but we should always remember the teachings of Romans chapter 14. We must not let our personal beliefs about a holiday create division among believers. At the same time, we should not use our freedom to make others struggle in their faith. Everything we do should be for the glory of God. From a Christian perspective, pagans are often seen as people involved in any religious practices or ceremonies that aren't Christian. Similarly, other beliefs also use the term pagans to talk about those who don't follow their religions. The word pagan comes from the Latin word paganus, which means country dweller. Paganism can also refer to polytheism, which is the worship of many gods, like in ancient Rome. A pagan can be seen as someone who mostly has no religion and enjoys worldly things and material possessions. This could mean indulging in physical pleasures or living a life focused on self-gratification.
The Roman Empire, in its relentless expansion, collided with the Celtic world. This clash of cultures brought with it a merging of traditions, a blending of rituals, and a deepening of the mysteries surrounding Halloween. The Romans, with their own pantheon of gods and goddesses, saw parallels between their beliefs and the Celtic reverence for the dead. They incorporated two of their own festivals into the celebration of Samhain. Feralia, a day in late October when Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead, and Pomona, a day honoring Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit trees and abundance. This fusion of Roman and Celtic traditions added new layers to the evolving story of Halloween. Apples, associated with Pomona, became intertwined with the holiday. The practice of bobbing for apples, a seemingly innocent game, took on a new, eerie significance. The Romans, known for their ruthlessness, brought a darker element to the celebration. Theirs was a world where death was a constant companion, where gladiatorial combat and public executions were forms of entertainment. This fascination with death, this macabre spectacle, wove its way into the fabric of Halloween. Halloween. A night of costumes and candy, a night of laughter and scares. But as the witching hour passes and the masks are put away, a lingering unease remains. We have peered into the shadows. We have glimpsed the darkness that lies at the heart of this ancient holiday. We have journeyed back in time to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. The truth, as we have discovered, is far more unsettling than any ghost story. Halloween is not just a night of harmless fun. It is a tapestry woven from ancient fears, primal instincts, and the enduring human fascination with death. This Halloween, as you don your costume and indulge in sweet treats, remember the bloody truth that lurks beneath the surface. Remember the ancient rituals, the forgotten fears, and the enduring power of belief. For on this night, anything is possible. This Halloween, we've unmasked the terrors that lurk beneath the surface. But the real question is, are you brave enough to face them? Let us know if you dare to celebrate differently now. But the darkness doesn't end with Halloween. Join us next time as we unearth the hidden horrors of another cherished holiday. Beware, for what you discover might just ruin your festive cheer forever.